Picture this, a Nonna's pantry, a cool, dark cantina lined with jars, sacks, and food hanging from the rafters, and not a single refrigerator in sight. Some of it had sat there for years, and it was all still perfectly good. Long before freezers, Italian grandmothers knew which foods never go bad and kept a stockpile that could carry a family through any winter. Today we're counting down 20 foods Italian grandmothers stockpiled that never expire. And stay for number 1. The one food scientists say literally never spoils, even after thousands of years. Let's get into it. Number 20. Dried beans, lentils, and chickpeas. This was the beating heart of a Nonna's pantry. And for one simple reason. Almost all the moisture has been dried out of them. And without moisture, the mold and bacteria that spoil food simply cannot grow. Kept cool and dry in a sealed jar, a sack of dried beans stays good not just for months but for years, and in many cases decades. A Nonna bought them by the kilo after the harvest and stored them away from any damp, and from that one humble stockpile she could pull a pot of ribollita, a rich stew, or a plate of pasta e fagioli on any night of the year for pennies. She'd keep several kinds, each in its own labeled jar. Creamy cannellini for soups, speckled borlotti for pasta e fagioli, chickpeas for a Friday minestra. And she had a rule for the oldest ones. The longer a bean has sat, the longer you soak it and the slower you simmer it, and it comes back perfectly tender every time. A cook who ran out of everything else could still put a hot, nourishing meal on the table from that one sack. It was protein and comfort you could keep almost forever. Insurance you could actually eat. And the next one sat right beside them on the shelf, just as patient. Number 19. White rice. A sealed jar of white rice can quietly outlast almost everything else in your kitchen, keeping for 10, 20, even 30 years as long as it stays dry. Because the bran and the natural oils have been polished away, there is nothing left in it to turn rancid, and its low moisture leaves no room for anything to spoil. A Nonna kept it for her risotto, her soups, her arancini, sealed tight against pantry moths and damp in a glass jar or a tin. To her, it was a base for 100 different meals that would still be there long after everything fresh in the house was gone. She had a trick to keep the moths out, too. A couple of dried bay leaves tucked right into the jar, which kept the pantry pests away without any chemicals at all. From that one jar came risotto on a Sunday, arancini from the leftovers on Monday, and a pot of rice and beans when the money was thin. Quiet, cheap, and nearly immortal. And the next one meant that dinner was never more than 10 minutes away. Number 18. Dried pasta. It sounds almost too obvious, but stop and think about it. A box of dried pasta is one of the longest-lasting foods you own, good for years beyond the date stamped on the side, because it's nothing but dried wheat, sometimes with a little egg, baked dry until there's no moisture left to spoil. A Nonna always kept far more than she needed, shelves of it in a dozen shapes, because it meant that no matter how bare the kitchen looked, a good meal was always within reach. If bringing back this old pantry wisdom sounds good to you, do me a favor and subscribe. We're bringing back the wisdom the world forgot. Dry, sealed, and endlessly patient. It simply waited for you. And the next one turned into golden comfort on the coldest days of the year. Number 17. Polenta, or dried cornmeal. In the North especially, a Nonna leaned on cornmeal the way other families leaned on bread, and a bag of it kept for a very long time in a cool, dry place. Dried and ground fine, with the moisture gone, it resisted spoiling for many months, ready to be stirred slowly into a pot of creamy, golden polenta that could stretch to feed everyone crowded around the table. She'd keep it sealed against damp and pantry moths, and draw from it all winter long, serving it soft and creamy under a stew one night, then pouring the leftovers onto a board to set firm overnight so she could slice and grill or fry it crisp the next day. Two completely different meals from the same humble bag. In the poorest years, a slab of cold polenta with a little cheese was dinner, and nobody went to bed hungry. Humble, warming, and made to last. And the next one packed the flavor of an entire autumn forest into a single paper bag. Number 16. Dried porcini mushrooms. Fresh mushrooms turned to slime in a matter of days, but Nonna knew that dried, they became something you could keep for a year or more, and that their flavor didn't just survive, it grew deeper and more powerful along the way. Drying pulls out the water that would rot them and concentrates all of that rich, earthy, meaty taste into little leathery pieces. She'd keep them in a jar, and whenever she wanted to lift a risotto or a Sunday sauce to something special, soak a small handful in warm water for 20 minutes to bring them roaring back to life. And she'd strain and save that dark, fragrant soaking water to pour into the pot too, because it was pure, concentrated flavor she'd never dream of throwing away. A small handful of dried porcini could make a humble pot of rice or a plain sauce taste like a feast, which is exactly why she rationed them out so carefully through the winter. A whole forest saved in a jar. And the next one was the pantry's little sweet treasure. Number 15. Dried figs and raisins. When summer's fresh fruit was long gone, Nonna still had sweetness waiting on the shelf, because dried figs and grapes keep for many months without any refrigeration at all. Drying does two powerful things at once here. It removes the water that spoilage needs, and it concentrates the fruit's own sugar, and that high sugar itself helps hold spoiling at bay. She'd string dried figs together or keep them in tins in the cool cantina and bring them out at the holidays, stuffed with a walnut and a scrap of orange peel, simmered into a compote, or simply handed to a grandchild as the candy of a time when there was no candy. Sweet, chewy, and built to wait for winter. And the next one was the snack that fell for free from the trees. Number 14. Dried chestnuts. Before pantries were full of imported everything, chestnuts were a genuine lifeline through the cold months, and dried, they kept for a very long time. With their moisture driven off, they resisted rot and could be stored for many months, then soaked and simmered back to tender for a soup, or ground into a sweet flour for bread and cakes when wheat ran scarce. Nonna in the hills treated a sack of dried chestnuts as real wealth, food that grew for free on the mountainside and then waited patiently in the dark all through the winter. She'd roast some over the fire, boil some into a soft, sweet soup with milk, and grind the rest into a fine flour for the dense, honeyed chestnut cakes that were a treat when there was no money for wheat. For whole villages in the mountains, that sack of dried chestnuts hanging in the dark was the difference between a hungry winter and a full one. Humble mountain gold. And the next one she kept so that everything else on her table still tasted alive. Number 13. Dried herbs and dried chili. A bundle of oregano, sage, or rosemary hung up to dry, or a long string of red chilies by the window, would keep for a year or more. They might slowly lose a little of their punch, but they never truly go bad, because there's simply no moisture left in them for anything to spoil. Nonna dried the summer's herbs at their peak and hung them from the kitchen beams, so that even in the dead of winter a pinch could carry the taste of the July garden into a plain pot of beans or a simple tomato sauce. That string of dried chili did the same, waiting to wake up a dish months after it was picked. Flavor, stockpiled and hanging right over her head. And the next one was summer itself, caught and saved for the cold. Number 12. Sun-dried tomatoes. When the tomato harvest came flooding in all at once, Nonna refused to let a single one rot. She laid them out and dried them in the blazing sun until they were leathery and sweet, and kept properly dried like that, they lasted for months on the shelf. The sun pulled the water right out and concentrated the tomato into an intense, tangy, sun-warmed bite that tasted of August. Stored dry in a jar, away from any moisture, they held all winter, ready to be soaked soft or chopped straight into a sauce in the middle of January. She'd chop them into a winter sauce, scatter them over bread with a little oil, or simmer them soft to remember the taste of summer. Just remember, dried and dry is the way they keep. If you ever pack them in oil, those belong in the fridge and get eaten soon. A single tray of ripe, August tomatoes, dried in the sun, became a jar of deep, sweet flavor that lasted her right through to spring. And the next one is one of the oldest ways ever known to keep the sea itself on your shelf. Number 11. Salt-packed anchovies. This one surprises almost everyone, but a jar of anchovies buried in coarse salt can keep for a very long time with no refrigeration at all, because that heavy salt draws the moisture out of the fish and creates a place where spoilage simply cannot take hold. A Nonna kept them tucked in the pantry to melt into her sauces, her greens, and her sauces for roast, where they dissolve away completely and leave behind nothing but a deep, savory richness people could never quite name. That is the ancient magic of salt as a preserver, doing the very same job it has done for thousands of years. The whole flavor of the sea kept on a dry shelf. And the next one is a kind of bread that laughs in the face of time. Number 10. Frizzelle, twice-baked hard bread. Here's one hardly anyone remembers today. A Nonna and the sailors and farmers before her baked their bread twice until it was rock hard and completely dried through, and bread like that keeps for weeks and even months, because with the moisture gone there is nothing left in it to go stale or grow mold. When it was time to eat, she'd dip it in water for just a few seconds to soften it, then pile it with chopped tomato, a flood of olive oil, a little salt and oregano, and it became a meal. Long-lasting bread, made hard on purpose, centuries before anyone thought to sell crackers in a box. Fishermen carried frizzelle for weeks at sea, and farmers took it to the fields because it never spoiled, and a splash of water and a ripe tomato turned it back into a real meal anywhere. A Nonna would keep a basket of them ready for the hungry days between baking. If your own Nonna kept a pantry like this, subscribe and cook along with us. We're keeping this wisdom alive together. And the next one was the rare food that only got better the longer it sat in the dark. Number 9. Hard aged cheese, like Parmigiano. A soft, fresh cheese spoils within days, but a wedge of true aged, hard cheese is built to last a long time, and a Nonna knew that the older it got, the better it became. These great cheeses are aged for years on purpose, their moisture driven low, and their salt kept high, which is exactly what holds spoilage back and lets them keep. She'd store a big piece wrapped in cloth or wax paper down in the cool cantina, grating from it a little at a time all year long, and she never threw away the hard rinds either. Those went straight into her soups and sauces to melt down into pure savory richness, a cheese that ages instead of spoiling. And the next one hung from a beam in that very same cool cellar. Number 8. Whole cured meats, salami, prosciutto, guanciale. This is old world food engineering at its finest, and it kept a family in flavor all year. A whole cured salami, or a whole leg of prosciutto, salted and slowly air-dried over months, becomes shelf-stable and can hang in a cool, dry cellar for a very long time because the salt and the patient drying pull out all the water that spoilage would need. A Nonna would slice from a hanging salami through the whole season, a little at a time. Now, once a cured meat is cut deep into or sliced up, it wants the cool of that cellar or the fridge and gets eaten before long. But that whole, hanging piece was a savory treasure built to wait. A thin slice of that salami with a piece of bread was a whole lunch in the fields, needing no cooking and no cold to keep it good until you ate it. This was how a family kept the flavor and the protein of a whole pig long into the year without a scrap of electricity. Salt, patience, and a cool, dark room doing all the work. Centuries of know-how hanging from a hook. And the next one was the liquid gold at the very center of her kitchen. Number 7. Olive oil. A good tin or a dark bottle of olive oil, kept cool and away from the light, lasts for a very long time, a couple of years and often more, because there is almost no water in it for anything to spoil. A Nonna bought it by the big tin after the autumn pressing and guarded it like real treasure, reaching for it constantly, to cook, to dress, to dip her bread, to pour over a finished plate. Her one firm rule was to keep it cool and dark, away from the heat of the stove and the glare of the window, since that light and heat are what slowly turn oil and steal its freshness. The everyday fat that quietly keeps for years. And the next one is very nearly immortal. Number 6, vinegar. A bottle of good vinegar in the pantry will very nearly outlive you, because vinegar is acid, and that acidity is one of the most powerful preservers there is. Spoilage organisms simply cannot survive in it, which is the very reason it preserves other foods so well. A Nonna kept strong wine vinegar to brighten a flat dish, to dress her greens, and above all, to put up her giardiniera and pickled vegetables for the winter. It never needed a fridge, it never really went off, and it quietly did half the preserving in her whole kitchen. She'd even keep the mother from her wine, that cloudy living culture, to make her next batch of vinegar for free, year after year. A splash of it could rescue a flat soup, cut the richness of a fatty meat, or turn a jar of summer vegetables into pickles that lasted till spring. A preserver that preserves even itself, and the next one preserved both itself and the good times along with it. Number 5, wine, grappa, and homemade liquor. A Nonna's cantina was never quite complete without a few bottles down there, and alcohol is a preserver all its own. A well-kept wine, and even more so a strong grappa or a homemade fruit liqueur, will last a long, long time because the alcohol holds spoilage firmly at bay. She'd keep grappa to warm a cold winter's night, and a big jar of cherries or lemon peel quietly steeping in spirit and sugar, turning month by month into something sweet and strong to pour at the holidays. Bottled, patient, and none the worse for the long wait. In fact, the fruit liqueur only grew smoother and more fragrant the longer it sat in the cool dark. A little glass of it at the end of a meal was her small, well-earned pleasure, and it cost her almost nothing to keep. Enjoyed in moderation, of course, the way she always did. And the next one she guarded for its little morning magic. Number 4, coffee beans. A Nonna understood, long before the cafes made a fuss about it, that whole coffee beans hold onto their life far, far longer than ground coffee ever could. Because the moment you grind it, coffee starts losing its soul within days, while sealed whole beans keep their aroma for months. She stored her beans in a tight tin, away from air, heat, and damp, and they waited there for the little mocha pot each morning. She ground only exactly what she needed, right before she brewed it, and that is the real secret behind why her coffee always tasted so alive when everyone else's had gone flat. A tin of whole beans was a small daily luxury she could count on for months, the little ritual that started every single morning the same warm way. Whole, sealed, and slow to fade. And the next two are the quiet, humble kings of the entire pantry. Number 3, salt. Plain salt never expires, not in a year, not in a lifetime, because it is a simple mineral with nothing in it that can spoil. But its real power runs far deeper than that. Salt is the master preserver, the single thing that made half of this very list possible. A Nonna used it to cure her meats, to pack her anchovies, to draw the water out of her eggplant, and to put up her vegetables, pulling the moisture from food so that spoilage could never take hold. A humble sack of salt was really a pantry full of possibilities, and it would sit there and keep, unchanged, forever, waiting for them. In the old days, salt was so precious it was almost money, and a Nonna treated it that way, never wasting a grain, because she understood it was the quiet engine behind nearly everything that lasted on her shelves, the one ingredient that saves all the others. And the next one is its sweet twin, number 2, Sugar. Just like salt, sugar itself simply does not spoil. Kept dry, it lasts indefinitely because there is no moisture in it for any microbe to live on. And just like salt, it is also a quiet preserver in its own right. The high sugar in a good jam is exactly what lets that jam keep for months on a pantry shelf without ever seeing a fridge. Nonna kept sugar not only to sweeten her coffee and her Sunday cakes, but to turn the summer's flood of fruit into jars of jam and preserves that would carry the family's sweetness deep into the coldest, barest months of winter. A glut of figs, plums, or cherries that would have rotted in days became, with enough sugar and a little time, spoonfuls of jam on the morning bread all the way to spring. Sweetness that keeps, and quietly keeps other things too. And now, number one, the single food that truly, scientifically, never spoils at all. Number one, honey. This is the one that sounds impossible and is completely, provably true. Honey never spoils. Archaeologists have opened sealed pots of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs, thousands of years old, and found it still perfectly good to eat. The reason is a kind of perfect storm of preservation, all in one golden jar. Honey has almost no water. It's naturally acidic, and it even carries a trace of natural hydrogen peroxide, so there is simply nowhere for spoilage to ever take hold. Nonna kept a jar of local honey close at hand, to sweeten, to soothe a scratchy throat, to spoon a little comfort onto warm bread. And she knew, without ever needing the science, that it would keep quite literally forever. If it ever turned solid and crystallized, she'd just set the jar in a bowl of warm water, and it flowed again, golden and good as the day the bees made it. Crystallizing was never a sign it had gone off, only that it was real, raw honey. She kept it for sweetening when sugar was dear, for a spoonful in warm milk to settle a restless child, and for a scratchy winter throat. Of everything in her entire pantry, this was the one that could outlast the centuries themselves. So there they are, 20 foods the Italian grandmothers stockpiled that simply never go bad. And when you lay them all out together, you finally see what her pantry truly was. It was never hoarding, and it was never fear. It was quiet security, the deep, settled peace of knowing that no matter what the winter brought, no matter how tight the money got, her family would always eat, and eat well. She understood something we've very nearly forgotten in our world of overnight deliveries and refrigerators packed with things that rot in a week. That the oldest foods, the dry ones, the salted ones, the sweet ones, were built by time and wisdom to last, and that a well-stocked pantry is really a quiet kind of freedom. So let me leave you with this. What food did your grandmother always keep a stockpile of? The one jar or sack that never seemed to run out or go bad? Tell me down below. Subscribe and cook along with us as we bring back the wisdom the world was starting to forget.